All right, so the last of the three things we're going to talk about here are some of the cultural forces that unite and divide the European Union. So, first off, the uniting forces that help bring people together culturally is the European Union's promotion of the European cultural identity. There are several things that the European Union does to try to make people feel more united in their Europeanness, I guess. So they have a motto. The motto stands for, or it means, united in diversity. So recognizing that there's lots of different kinds of people in Europe, but we can unite together despite that. They have common cultural symbols such as the EU flag. They have an anthem, Ode to Joy from Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, and they celebrate Europe Day on May 9th every year. Okay, so it's everyone coming together to celebrate Europe's unitedness in achieving and accomplishing goals together. The other cultural forces that bring people together in the EU, again, are those open borders, those fences that are being brought down. By having open borders and by allowing people to move freely between the countries. The European Union has really encouraged travel, and the euro has helped with this as well. So, having a common currency, you can easily go from France to Spain to Italy without having to worry about anything, without having to get stopped by Border Patrol and show your passports and change money, and really promoting travel is really an important force culturally. So when you travel or you take holidays in Europe, as they're called, it is highly encouraged. They encourage people to do it often. They often have great deals on public transportation and trains and flights that can get you very quickly from one place to the next. Another thing that really fosters this is the calendar. The school year calendar in Europe is very different. They do have year-round schooling, which I know that some people, oh, I don't want to, go to school in the summer. But actually, when you look at a European year-round schooling calendar, you actually get out of school a little bit more. And what that does, it creates more travel opportunities for families throughout the year. So they may still, go to school like maybe say August like we do. But then they may get like a couple weeks off in October, and then they get their 2 or 3 weeks off in December, and then they get another week or so off in February, and then a few more weeks off in April, and then another few weeks or a handful of weeks off in June. So even though year-round school sounds bad, you actually end up getting more time off, and that encourages a lot of traveling throughout Europe. The good thing is traveling to new places helps you see and experience different cultures and different people, helps you appreciate the similarities and see the beauty and the differences between the types of people. So traveling actually is really good for bringing people together, uniting them so that we see we're really not that different, and just experiencing a different culture and being in a different place is just a really good thing for people treating each other with respect and understanding each other. So that's something the EU definitely promotes, that unites and brings people together. Also in Europe, one thing that also adds to this is in Europe, students are taught multiple languages from a very young age. It's pretty much expected that every school in Europe is maybe taught in the home or dominant language of the country. And then they start teaching very young children, as young as in kindergarten or first grade, at least two other languages. That typically tends to be English, French, maybe German, Italian, maybe Spanish, depending on where you're at. But usually, kids in Europe can speak multiple languages pretty easily because they're taught from a very young age to do that. And obviously, communication is key, getting along with other people. So, knowing those languages is pretty important. All right, so the dividing forces, though, that unfortunately pull people apart and create some division are those many languages. So having many, many languages amongst the European nations makes communication quite difficult. The EU must translate all of its speeches and documents that it creates into 24 different languages. And this actually can be quite daunting. It turns out to be millions and millions of pages of paper just to make sure that every country and every person in the EU is able to understand legislation, laws, or announcements. The other thing that's kind of a dividing force is this idea of national pride. So this works against that European identity. Some people have a real hard time putting all of Europe above their own individual or independent nation's interests. So really saying, I'm European over being French is very hard for some people in France. And maybe there's certain things that are important to the French people that they don't want to give up and they want to hang on to. And they don't like this idea of a European cultural identity. Also, because there is a deep, long history and world wars and conflict, there is a lot of competition and rivalries amongst these countries, and that can make working together quite a challenge. Another force that divides the EU is this cultural traditions clashing with some of the EU rules, procedures, and policies. So what I mean by this is here are some examples. The EU might create a policy, a code, an expectation, and it may clash with a cultural expectation. So in the Czech Republic, foods are often cooked very slowly, sometimes even over days, because they will taste better and they will absorb the flavors of the other foods it's cooked with. But the EU has a rule stating that food cannot be served to anyone if it's over 2 hours old. So because of that, that really goes against some of the Czech traditions in food and how it's served. Another example of this is bullfighting. So bullfighting is a cultural tradition in Spain. It's been done for many, many years, but there are some EU countries that are raising flags over bullfighting, thinking that it's cruel, it's inhumane, and it should be banned. So that then goes against what people have been doing in Spain for a very, very long time. And ultimately, because the EU overrides independent countries, if the EU votes on a law and they ban bullfighting, people in Spain will have to give that up. And that would be a big problem. All right, so this is it for the cultural forces. So if you haven't yet, take a moment, get down those notes, do what you need to do, and make sure I get them checked. We're almost done. We have one more piece to talk about and cover, and then we will wrap this chapter up. Thanks.